we have a tradition in the South where I grew up, and maybe it is here too. I just don't know. You guys can hear, but we used to have something we called rocking the pool. You ever rock the pool? Do you guys do that here? Does that make any sense to you at all? Okay, no, they're looking at me like we're not even listening to you right now. You're just using words. We had a tradition called rocking the pool when I was growing up. I grew up in a neighborhood that had tons of kids in it. It was just kids all over the place, and we had a pool in our neighborhood that everybody could be a member of, and that's where we spent our summers. All the kids in the neighborhood would spend their days up at the pool. And it was a lot of fun, and it seemed like about once a day all the kids somehow, especially the bigger kids, would kind of drive this pool. There would be a moment when it was like, hey guys, let's rock the pool. Now mind you, the lifeguards did not approve of this behavior. But what it was is we would all line up at the diving board, and we would all kind of get in this line, and like I said, there were a bunch of us, and we'd line up at the diving board, and then as quickly as you can, everybody starts jumping off that diving board. One person would go to the right, the next person would go to the left. You just do it as fast as you clear out, fast as you can, and when you're going in, you're doing can openers, cannonballs, making as big of a splash and big of waves as you can. Now, the first couple of people that go in, so what? It is somebody makes a big splash and makes a big wave, it goes out, and comes back to the middle, and that's it. I mean, you get a second person, a third person doing it, and the waves start increasing. But man, when you start doing that over several minutes, kids just going one after the other, all of a sudden you step back and water's just sloshing out of the pool, and all the parents' towels are getting wet, and they're angry, and it's just so much fun. And the water's all, and it's just, if you're standing in the shallow and the waves are big, they're kind of like coming up over you, and it was so much fun. It was kind of stupid, but it was fun. We would get out of the pool. It was funny, after we got done doing it, we'd all kind of be standing around the edge of the pool huffing and puffing because we were going so fast and trying to run so fast and do it. And we'd all kind of stand there with our arms folded looking at that pool, all the water sloshing out of it. And the lifeguard's mad, blowing whistle and all that kind of stuff. And man, there was just a moment of kind of some just satisfaction. Yeah, look what we did, We rocked the pool. Yeah, we rocked it. Yeah, and it was just one of those things. There was some satisfaction on knowing that we did. Not one person can't rock a pool. 5 people can't really rock a pool. It's got to be a group effort, And for a few minutes every day at the pool in Wellington Hills, the name of our neighborhood, at the Wellington Hills pool, just for a few minutes every day, all the kids, the geeky, nerdy kids, and the kids that played the sports, and the kids that were afraid to get their hair wet, all of them, all kind of came together for a few minutes, and we all did something together, It was just a moment of, satisfaction in it. I think sometimes the church looks like that. Sometimes, I remember when I was in North Carolina, I was a youth pastor at a church in North Carolina, and we got connected with a mission organization called Crossroads. They're still around today, and you may have heard of them. But they had a unique approach to ministry. A lot of mission organizations will take groups down to places like around the country or down to Guatemala or Mexico or wherever to build houses, right? And you've heard of those trips. Some of you may have been on a trip like that where you go down and build a house somewhere. Well, Crossroads, they do it a little differently. They realize there are a lot of people who can't travel like that, maybe for physical reasons or because of their schedule, things like that. And so they bring the project to you. And it was a pretty cool thing. They brought the project to us at Jefferson when I was in North Carolina. And what they do is they will, if you raise the money to buy the materials, it was about $3,000 to buy the materials, and they will come out and in one afternoon, you get to frame out an entire house, which they will then take apart in sections, load on a big truck, and ship it to where they're going to build it. And then there will be a group down there that puts the frame back together and finishes out the house. And it was just a cool opportunity right there in our parking lot to come together. And I remember the day we did that at Jefferson, we had our parking lot, the back parking lot of that church set up where lumber everywhere. Everybody shows up with their hammers and their carpentry belts. And you have some guys some people that are skilled carpenters and know what they're doing. Other people are good with organization. Some people are good at giving demanding directions. Everybody has their gift, right? And so everybody was kind of out there, but we all came together as a church. We're all out there swinging hammers. We all got to be a part of building that house. And in one afternoon, we framed out a 3-bedroom house. This wasn't a small deal either. It was a pretty big deal. And then we loaded it up on that truck, and they sent it off for another group to do the finished end product. But it was kind of cool. We all stood there together because I realized there's no way I could have done that on my own. There's no way I could have even done that just with the youth group. But our entire church coming together, several hundred of us that day, out there swinging hammers and framing this house out. And we kind of stood back and just saw in one afternoon how we framed out an entire house. That was pretty cool. That's kind of how I felt last Sunday with that great day of service. Those of you who were a part of that day with us, that last Sunday night when we were in here for the worship time, and you saw people coming up onto the stage to tell their stories from the day, the projects that they were doing, and the different people they encountered, and some of the stories they had. And I don't know, I remember thinking during the day when we were up at Burkhart, my group was up at Burkhart Funeral Home, and we were cooking out, and we were meeting people. We were serving young men from Wabash some lunch, and we had about 30 of them come by that afternoon, and we had some other families come by who just could use a meal, and we were able to do that. One of the Crawfordsville policemen knew where a couple of people who were homeless were. He went and actually picked them up and brought them to us so we could feed them, and we got to have some conversations. We got to just to have a touch on people's life. It was something that I couldn't have done on my own, or none of us could have. But we came together for a few minutes, and we rocked the pool. We got to stand there and just enjoy what it felt like to come together. That's really what the butterfly effect is all about. As we talk about the butterfly effect, and the series is taking one small change in circumstances right now, something that maybe seems insignificant, and having no idea the impact that's going to have down the road. Having no idea what that's going to look like in the future. That's what it is. Coming together and doing a cookout at Burkhart Funeral Home seems so, small and insignificant on the surface. Some of you did jobs where you're painting or cleaning or serving people or doing games or singing or whatever it was you did. And on the surface, it's easy to look at it and say, did we really do anything? Did we really make any kind of impact on the kingdom? It's easy to question that. But the butterfly effect is all about saying, you know what, I have no idea what God is going to do with that small act of obedience. You see, God calls us to follow. Follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. He calls us to follow, and when we answer that call, sometimes it just seems so simple, the things he calls us to. How is that possibly going to make any difference? But when we do, we learn that it's God's job to handle the results, right? Our job's to be obedient. Our job's to answer the call. Let's let him handle what he does with that. What he does with that conversation you had with somebody down the road. What he does with that service project you did down the road. That's what this is all about. I showed you this circle, and there's some of these back at the back if you want to grab one. A couple weeks ago I talked about this. If you take a 15-mile radius from this building right here, put it on a map, that's what it looks like. The 15-mile radius covers 706.5 square miles. Inside that area of 706.5 square miles, 15 miles in all directions from this property right here, live about 40,000 people. We know, statistically speaking, about 30,000 of them don't know Jesus. Maybe more. I asked you when we looked at this a couple weeks ago to imagine like this is a pond. And every Sunday, we come in here together and we drop a rock in the middle of that pond, right? And it sends out waves, and we hope maybe it has some kind of impact. But what happens when all of us pick up a rock and throw it into the pond? What happens when we start throwing rocks, not just right here at the property of New Hope Christian Church? What happens when we start throwing rocks in Waveland and Waynetown and Darlington and Roachdale and just go around, look at all the little towns on here that the 15-mile radius covers. And we all start where you live, where you work, where you go to hang out or have fun. And we start throwing rocks into those places. Kind of like a bunch of kids jumping in the pool, right? Pretty soon you can see that it takes all of us to rock the pool. It takes all of us if we want to disturb the pond. Man, I don't want us to be a church that's content with just dropping a rock in the middle every Sunday morning. I want us to be a church that really is determined to disturb the pond, to rock the pool, if you will, in this community, because I think we can. Jesus has told us as much, right? I kind of think that's what he had in mind when he told Peter, you're the rock that I'm going to build my church on, and the gates of hell won't stand against it. I want you to make a difference. I think that's the kind of thing he had in mind. I like what Peter wrote, and today our text is going to be exclusively found in 1 Peter chapter 2, if you want to go there in your Bible. And I want to take a look at that, and really, you saw it in the video, verses 4 through 9. We're going to actually go through verse 12 today, but I want to back up a little bit to verses 1 through 3. Peter kind of sets this up for us. What he's doing is he's saying, guys, when you answer the call of Jesus, when he says, come follow me, he's saying this is what it looks like, and this is what it can look like, church. And this is what it can look like for you as an individual. Let's look at these first 3 verses. They kind of set up this whole passage, and then we'll go from there. It says, therefore, rid yourself of all malice and deceit, hypocrisy, envy, and slander of every kind. Like newborn babies, crave pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow up in your salvation, now that you have tasted that the Lord is good. Now, Peter's setting us up here. He's saying, listen, you've answered the call. Jesus has called you out of the world. He said, come follow me. Just like he did Peter and Andrew and James and John when they were fishing on the Sea of Galilee. Come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men. Come see what will happen when I transform your life. And Peter's echoing this here. He's saying, when you come and you begin craving this pure spiritual milk, and you begin growing up in your salvation, that's not the end of the journey, it's the beginning of the journey. I imagine a lot of us in here have answered the call to some degree or another. Come follow me, and let me transform you into a fisher of men. Let me transform you into a disciple maker. And I imagine most of us in here have answered that call to a certain degree. And now you're starting to crave this pure spiritual milk. You're starting to grow up in your salvation. So Peter says, but that's not the end of the line. That's actually the beginning. Because Jesus wants you to disturb the pond. He wants you to have an impact on that circle. There are 30,000 lives at stake that he wants you to have an impact, that he wants us. He put this church here for a reason, right? He put us here to have an impact. And I got to tell you, I think it's more than just coming in here for a little bit every Sunday morning. I think he wants us to do more than just drop a pebble in the middle of the pond. I think he wants us to rock the pool. And that's what Peter goes on to talk about here in the rest of chapter 2. Let me read it to you. Let's talk about it. And here's, I just want to give this to you before I go into that. The church, and I believe this to be a truth, the church was never meant to be an auditorium of observing spectators. And I want you to think about that. The church was never meant, like I said before, when Jesus said to Peter, upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. In Acts 1:8, when Jesus tells his disciples, the Holy Spirit comes on you, you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem and all Judea and Samaria and to the very ends of the earth. I think that's exactly what he had in mind. He was saying, Guys, this is church. When the Holy Spirit comes on you, when you are transformed, when you're obedient and walking, then all of a sudden you begin we all together, we begin to throw rocks into the pond. We begin disturbing this. We begin making a difference. And it never was about, the church was never meant to be a group of people coming into an auditorium and listening to a speaker and that being the extent of what they're going to do. I think it was always meant to be more than that. So Peter goes on in 1 Peter chapter 2. Peter goes on to talk about what it looks like. How is it we can disturb the pond? Let's read it together and then we'll talk about it. It says, as you come to him, the living stone, talking about Jesus, rejected by humans but chosen by God and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house to be a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For in Scripture it says, see, I lay a stone in Zion, a chosen precious cornerstone, and the one who trusts in him will never be put to shame. Now to you who believe, this stone is precious. But to those who do not believe, the stone the builders rejected has become the cornerstone, and a stone that causes people to stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. They stumble because they disobey the message, which is also what they were destined for. But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. Dear friends, I urge you, as foreigners and exiles, to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. Live such good lives among the pagans, that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Listen, if you look at this text, it's a call to being more, so much more than casual observers in an auditorium on Sunday morning. It's a call to action. It's a call to rock the pool, to disturb the pond. So let's talk about what that looks like. What does it take? What does it take, New Hope, to disturb the pond? What does it take if we are going to have the impact that says, how can 250, 300 people that are right now a part of what we call New Hope Christian Church, how can we possibly have an impact and have any kind of chance of reaching 30,000 people that live within 15 miles of here? And by the way, I just want to throw this in. This has nothing to do with numbers. Has nothing to do with trying to become a big church or gain power or market share or anything like that. It has to do with us answering the call of Jesus to be the church in this community, to have the impact in this community that he's put us here for, to reach as many people as we can. And I believe we can do that when we follow the script that he's provided for us, when we do the things he's challenged and called us to do. And guys, there are 30,000 people within 15 miles of here, all directions, that need to know Jesus, and he's called us to do it. So how do we disturb the pond? How do we do it? Well, there are 4 things I want to throw at you to think about today. The first one is this, is you can't play until you surrender. And that's number 1. We have a phrase I like to use with our Connect groups. And I hope if your Connect group doesn't use this phrase now, I hope you'll start soon. But in our Connect groups, we use this phrase that we want to give people a place to play. And what we mean by that is we want to provide places where every single one of us, every single person in our church has a place to live out ministry. You've been gifted in some way. You've been given a talent. You've been given skills and developed skills. You've been given a heart for certain things, right? There are certain things you get passionate about, excited about. And God's put that into each of us. And we want to give you a place to use that in ministry because that's what the call is all about. That's what discipleship's all about, is growing to that place. We want to give you a place to play, but I want you to hear this. You can't play until you surrender. You can't. You can't play until, you see, it begins with that call. Jesus, when he called his disciples, it started with, "Come, follow me. And then I'll make you fishers of men. I'll transform you." But you've got to do something too, right? You've got to answer the call. You've got to surrender to him. It says right there at the very beginning of the text we're looking at today, 1 Peter 2:4, as you come to him, the living stone. And I've got to ask you right now, have you surrendered to Jesus? In your own life, have you? Have you really come to a place, if you come to a place where you said, I realize I can't do this on my own. I can't save myself. I can't do anything about regaining my righteousness because I've sinned and fallen short, right? And I can't do anything about that. But he can. Have you come to the place where you've realized that? That no matter how hard you try, no matter how many good things you try to do, you can never erase the fact that you've fallen. And that's the beauty of the grace of Jesus. Surrender to him and he gives you a place to play. Surrender to him and he adopts you as his child. Surrender to him and he welcomes you in to be a part of the family. Adopted the sonship, right? He gives you a chance to come be a part. He gives you a place to play and be a part of his ministry, his building, his kingdom. If we are going to disturb the pond, if you are going to rock the pool, it must start with you answering the call when Jesus says, "Come follow me." Have you done that? Because you can't play until you do. That's where it begins if we're going to disturb the pond. The second place we've got to look, if we're going to disturb the pond, is we've got to understand this. Stop going to church and be the church. I want you to think about that for a second. If we, New Hope, if you as an individual are going to be a part of rocking the pool, disturbing the pond, then you've got to understand that it's time to stop going to church and it's time to be the church. Listen, we are blessed to have the property and the facilities that we have here at New Hope. I truly thank God for the resources that he's provided us with. But with such blessing and such resources, we have to be careful. Now, I've shared this section of Erwin McManus's book, Seizing Your Divine Moment, before, and I just want to share it with you again and relate it to this. Erwin McManus, in his book, Seizing Your Divine Moment, he talks about a time early in his ministry where he really had nothing. He was newly married, no kids or anything like that. They didn't really have anything. And in their ministry, they were starting out. And he says it was actually fairly easy because they were committed to answering the call of Jesus. When Jesus called them to ministry, they were ready to go. If he called them to go somewhere new or to go somewhere hard, they were ready to go. But something happened along the way. As they were answering this call of Jesus, as he called them to things, they began to see success. His family, for one thing, grew. Their income grew. They started having kids, and they were able to acquire possessions, a house and cars. And the church was doing well in their ministry, and they were starting to grow. And there came a moment when the call of Jesus came to something new, and he hesitated. And in that moment, he realized that the blessings of God had actually become shackles, anchors. I think sometimes that happens in the church too, right? I think sometimes it happens in our own lives. is the blessings of God become the things that keep us from stepping out to where He's calling us next. Man, I don't want to see that happen to us. When I was a youth pastor down in Florida, it was a unique setting that we were in down there. We didn't own property as a church. We had our offices in a trailer on the campus of Florida Christian College. Man, that was a dump. Not the college, but the trailer. But we had services at a high school in Orlando. We would go in, and it was the coolest thing. I remember, and it was hard at times, but man, I remember it was the coolest thing because we had two trailers that we kept parked out, two trailers you could put on a hitch and haul with you, full. One of them was full of all of our children's ministry equipment, or our nursery and all this kind of stuff, and then the other one was full of all of our sound equipment for worship. And these trailers, every Sunday morning, a couple of guys would come hitch those trailers up, pull them up to the high school, Gateway High School in Orlando, pull them up there, and we would have an army of people from the church ready and waiting. This was about 2 hours before services, right? And we would all get in there, we'd unload those trailers, we'd set up the children's ministry areas, we would come in there, we'd set up the sound system and set up the worship areas, set up all the chairs. We'd have to pick up all the tables in the cafeteria and put down all the chairs. And then you feel like you've already had a full day of work. We would do worship and have our worship time together, and then we would undo it all. Pick up all the chairs, put all the tables back, pack up the trailers, and get out of there. And yeah, like I said, it was difficult. But I'll tell you this, there was no question about what the church was. Had nothing to do with the building or the property. All of us came together every Sunday and worked together, and we were the church. And it was sweet. It was a pretty cool thing to be a part of. And I'm not saying property and buildings are bad by any means. I thank God for them, but man, we can't let those blessings be the anchors that keep us from answering His call and doing the things that He's called us to do. 1 Peter 2:5, he says, you also, like living stones, he's not talking, and I want to be clear here, he's not talking to the preachers and the staff members or even the elders, right, Dan? He's not just talking to us. Look at what it says. You also, all of you, are like living stones, being built into a spiritual house. And this is what he's telling you, to be what? A holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. Here's a simple truth, guys, that we've got to take hold of. You are not very likely to disturb the pond sitting here in this room for an hour and 15 minutes every Sunday morning. It's not going to happen. If this right here is all there is to church for you, then you're just going to church. My hope and desire is for church to be so much more than that for you. I think it's the desire of Jesus too. That's why we talk so much about connect groups. You know where church is happening? Right here, this is our time to come together and to kind of celebrate. I look at our worship services as a time to be uplifted, to encourage each other and to celebrate. But you know where church is happening? Church is happening in our connect groups. Church is happening when our connect groups get together and they look into the Word of God and they get to talk about it and learn from each other. Church is happening when our connect groups get together and they talk about ministry opportunities and they talk about where they can find a place to play in the church. Church is happening in our connect groups when we start thinking about people that we need to bring into our group who might not come to church with us on a Sunday morning, but maybe we could get them to come hang out with our group when we meet. Church is happening when our connect groups get together and serve people and serve our community in some way like we did last Sunday. That's it. That's what we want our connect coaches leading our groups to do. We want them to be more than just places where we have a lesson. We want our connect groups to be places where church is happening. And I think for a lot of them, we're starting to see that. That's why we make such a big deal out of connect groups. Because it's not just going to church. It's being the church. It's building those relationships with each other. And that's what this is all about. Guys, if we're going to disturb the pond, we've got to stop going to church and we've got to start being the church. The third thing, if we're going to disturb the pond that I want to throw at you this morning is this. It's a challenge. Be different. Be holy. I want you to think about that. Guys, if we are going to disturb the pond in a way that draws people in, that makes us an irresistible community like we talked about a couple weeks ago, then we must be different. And I'm not talking about different in a self-righteous or pious kind of way. I'm talking about in a way that says, you know what? We represent Jesus in this community. We are his ambassadors. We sometimes you go around and you wear this label, Christian, Christ follower, and you're the only Christ that the 30,000 people within 15 miles of here will ever get to see of who Jesus is. Are you representing him well? Are you putting a good picture out there for who Jesus really is? Now, I'm going to be honest, and don't worry, I never would call out names. But man, I see some things that get put out on Facebook that make me cringe by people who call themselves Christians, representatives of Christ. There are times, I'll be honest with you, when I read a post someone puts up and I say, man, I hope nobody knows they go to New Hope. And I'm not trying to be mean. I'm just simply saying, man, if we're going to disturb the pond, we've got to represent him. Because people are watching. And people notice. And if they know you call yourself a Christian, man, take that seriously. Represent him well. He says, Peter tells us in verse 11 of this chapter, he says, dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to abstain from sinful desires which wage war against your soul. And the challenge is this. Take some time to think about your words and your actions. Ask if you're representing Christ or if you're just representing yourself. Think before you post. Think about how you speak to the server in the restaurant, even when the service is bad. Think about the language that you use at work or the kind of jokes you tell. Just think about that stuff. Because if we're going to disturb the pond, then we've got to understand who it is we represent. And we've got to start taking it seriously that we're called to be different. We are called to be holy. And the fourth thing I want to give you if we are going to disturb the pond is this, that everything points to God. In the very last verse that we've read in chapter 2, verse 12, it says, live such good lives among the pagans that though they accuse you of doing wrong, they may see your good deeds and glorify God on the day he visits us. Guys, if this is truly your mission, to be a part of building God's kingdom through his church, if you really want to answer the call of Jesus, to disturb the pond, to rock the pool, however you want to look at it, then let everything point to God. Let everything you do at work somehow point to God. Let everything you do among your neighbors point to God. Let your marriage point to God. Let the things you do at home with your kids point to God. That's what it means. If we are going to be the kind of people that when people look at us, even if they don't agree with us, even if they hate us because we call ourselves Christians, let's give them every opportunity to see the real Jesus and to worship him. That's how we disturb the pond. Guys, the reason we are so determined to get every single one of you into a connect group And I've got to tell you, we're not going to stop talking about it. And we are not going to stop doing everything we can to get you plugged into a group if you're not in one yet. And the reason we do that is because that is where you get to throw stones into the pond. That is going to be where we rock the pool. We want you to find a place to play. We want you to use your group to reach out to people who need Jesus. We want you to have a place to not just listen to a sermon, but to talk about Scripture and what you can learn from each other. We want you to have a place where you can have fun and really get to know people. We want you to take advantage of opportunities to serve the community. There's one that Tyler talked about in the video, and you have this card in your bulletin. If you want to take that out, I'd encourage you to take it out right now and look at it. Take this card out, and let's look at it together. Because this is an opportunity we want to give you to serve our community. What we're going to do on November 17th, Saturday before Thanksgiving, we want to provide meals. This is a really simple thing. We want to provide meals for some people who could use the encouragement, who have needs. And you know people in your life that fit that description. You know people in your life somewhere in this community who have needs. Maybe they're going through a really tough time financially. Maybe they just don't have a lot. Maybe they just need to know. Maybe they're lonely and they need to know somebody cares. What we want you to do is, if you know some people like that, fill this card out with their information and turn it in. You can drop it in the box on your way out today. If you don't know their information, take it with you. We're going to collect these for the next 2 Sundays. Deadline to get these cards into us is in 2 weeks from now, October 28th. We want you to fill these cards out. If you have more than one person or one family, there are more cards out at the Connection Center. We can print more, right, Shelley? We can even print more, absolutely, yeah. And so it's an opportunity. We want to serve these families. And so what we're going to do on the 28th, once we find out how many families we're making meals for, how much food we're going to need, then we're going to give you an opportunity to sign up for bringing in a portion of that meal that day. And then that morning, we're all going to come together. Everybody's going to bring in their food that they've prepared at home. We're going to make plates, and then we're going to distribute the food to these families. It's just a simple opportunity to take the focus off ourselves and put it on someone else for a few minutes during Thanksgiving. And man, what a great opportunity that will be for you to teach your kids, right? To say, let's think about someone besides ourselves. Those are the kind of things that we've got to focus on if we're going to disturb the pond here in our community and make a difference. Let's disturb the pond. Let's be the church that is impacting lives. And the best way to get started is to get plugged in with one of our Connect groups so we can stop just going to church and we can start being the church. If you need help getting into a group, man, come talk to me. Come talk to Mike. We'll help you find a group. I have no idea what God's going to do with us. These seemingly small and insignificant things, I have no idea what God's going to do with it. But you know what? That's not my job to know. It's not yours either. Our job is to answer the call when He says, come follow me. Let's let God worry about the results, right? I want to disturb the pond. I want to rock the pool. How about you? That's what we're here for.